Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. The sky over the contested sector of space was choked with alien warships, an armada so vast it eclipsed the distant sun. The Zerari Imperium, a race of towering insectoid conquerors, had spent centuries expanding their empire unchallenged. Every world they touched either fell in line or was reduced to nothing but smoldering rock. And now they had come for Epsilon Prime, a human colony on the farthest edge of explored space. The Zerari never expected resistance. Humanity was small, weak, barely worth notice on the galactic stage. Their fleets, the Imperium believed, were laughable compared to the might of an empire that had crushed countless civilizations before them. So when the Zerari fleet encircled Epsilon Prime and demanded surrender, they thought it was a mere formality. But no response came. The Zerari, confused but not concerned, assumed the humans were simply preparing for inevitable surrender. They gave them an hour, then two. When there was still silence, they laughed among themselves. Their fear had frozen them. Chittered war leader Zeller, his mandibles clicking in amusement, typical of a lesser species. He raised a clawed hand and gave the order to commence orbital bombardment. The first barrage of plasma lances tore through the colony's outer structures, reducing buildings to slag. The planet burned. Explosions sent plumes of fire and debris into the atmosphere. This was how it always was, how it had always been, until the alarm started blaring. Something was coming. Something was warping into the system at speeds the Zerari had never seen before. The first ship dropped out of FTL with a thunderous rip in spacetime. A monstrous construct of metal and rage, the UHS Retribution, a Terran dreadnought that eclipsed the nearest Zerari cruisers in sheer size. Its hull was lined with scars from past battles, yet it exuded an air of unshaken defiance. Then came another, and another. Within moments, the once empty void was brimming with hundreds of human warships. Destroyers, frigates, carriers, and behemoth-class capital ships designed for nothing but destruction. The Zerari fleet, so confident moments before, now found itself staring at an impossible reality. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They had come prepared for war. Zeller's mandibles twitched in disbelief as he processed the readings. The humans had never been reported to have a fleet of this magnitude. No intelligence suggested they had built anything close to this. Yet here it was, undeniable and terrifying. A human voice crackled over the comms, strong and unwavering. "This is Admiral James Carter of the Terran Defense Fleet. You have attacked a sovereign human world. You have one chance to retreat. If you refuse," he paused, letting the weight of his words settle, "then you will burn for the first time in your history." The Zerari hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, the first human railgun volley tore through their front lines like a god's judgment. The first volley hit like a divine hammer. Kinetic rounds, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light, shredded through Zerari warships as if they were made of paper. The vanguard of the alien fleet erupted in a chain reaction of fire and destruction. Holes cracked open, crews were vaporized before they could even react. Zeller's command ship shook violently as debris from his fallen fleet pelted its shields. The war leader's mandibles spread wide in shock and rage. "How?" he bellowed. "How do they have such firepower?" The Zerari had fought hundreds of wars. They had crushed dozens of species beneath their clawed feet. Not once had they encountered this kind of resistance. Humanity had been considered weak, but this was something else. "War leader," an officer screeched, his mandibles clicking nervously. "The humans are advancing, more ships arriving from hyperspace." Zeller turned to the tactical display and felt a wave of cold dread. The humans weren't just pushing forward, they were surgically dismantling his fleet. Their dreadnoughts formed an impenetrable wall, while smaller destroyers weaved through the chaos, launching precision strikes at vulnerable points in the Zerari formation. Human bombers swarmed like angry hornets, striking engines and weapon systems with terrifying accuracy. This wasn't the desperate, chaotic defense of a weak species. This was an execution. The Terran fleet moved with discipline and coordination that the Zerari had only seen in empires much older, much stronger. But humanity wasn't old. They were young, reckless, and ruthless. Admiral Carter's voice cut through the battlefield's chaos again. "You had your chance to leave." Another barrage of railgun rounds fired. The Zerari tried to counter, but their weapons were too slow, too outdated. Their plasma beams took too long to charge, while human railguns could fire in rapid succession, delivering city-leveling devastation with every impact. One of the Zerari dreadnoughts, the Emperor's Claw, tried to turn and flee, but before it could activate its jump drive, a coordinated strike from 3 human battle cruisers punched through its shields. The ship exploded, sending shock waves through the battlefield. Panic spread. A new realization dawned in the Zerari ranks. They had always been the hunters, the conquerors, but now they were the prey. Zeller's claws gripped the edge of his command console. His officers were screaming at him for orders. Should we retreat? Call for reinforcements? We can't win this fight. But the war leader was frozen. He had never considered that there might come a day when the Zerari, his mind raced through centuries of conquest and none of it mattered. Not here. Not now. Sir Zeller finally snapped out of his stupor, his mind settling on a single desperate thought. If they ran now, the Imperium would never recover. The humans would see them as weak, and if humanity had this kind of power now, what would they have in a decade? There would be no retreat. He straightened, his mandibles clicking with finality. All ships concentrate fire on their flagship, he growled. We kill their leader, we break their will. Across the Zerari fleet, orders were relayed. The surviving warships shifted their focus, plasma turrets turned, missile bays opened, and dozens of beams of searing energy lanced toward the UHS Retribution. Admiral Carter watched the incoming fire, calm and unshaken, and braced for impact. He said, "The human dreadnought's shields flared as plasma scorched across its surface. Hull plating melted, armor buckled, but the ship held. And then it returned fire. The Retribution's main cannon, a magnetic accelerator so powerful it could crack moons, began charging. The air inside the ship hummed with energy as the reactor diverted everything into a single, concentrated shot. A shot meant for a war leadership. Zeller barely had time to scream before the world turned white. The Zerari command ship, once the mighty fist of the Imperium, stood no chance. The moment the UHS Retribution fired its main cannon, a blinding lance of energy and kinetic force ripped through the void. It struck the alien warship dead center. For half a second there was silence, then the entire vessel detonated. A massive explosion consumed the war leader's flagship, sending debris spiraling outward like dying stars. The shock wave rippled through the battlefield, knocking smaller ships off course. Chunks of twisted metal, remnants of what was once the pride of the Zerari fleet, slammed into nearby vessels, causing secondary explosions that rippled through their lines. Zeller is gone, and with him the Imperium's iron grip on the battle shattered, an officer observed. Panic set in across the remaining Zerari fleet. Officers chittered in fear. The chain of command had collapsed. They had never expected to lose, never expected the humans to be more than a minor nuisance, but now they were being slaughtered. War leader Zeller is gone. Their flagship still stands. We cannot win. The fear spread like wildfire, and soon the once mighty Zerari fleet did the unthinkable. They ran. Dozens of ships broke formation, activating their FTL drives in sheer desperation. Some didn't even plot coordinates, they just wanted to escape. Others weren't so lucky. Human warships cut off their escape routes, picking them off one by one. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as the Zerari fleet collapsed. He had seen many battles, but this was a turning point. The galaxy had long ignored humanity, treating them as insignificant, but now the stars would remember this day. A voice crackled over the comms. It was Captain Vasquez from the UHS Titan. "Admiral, the Zerari are retreating. Should we pursue?" Carter exhaled slowly, staring at the wreckage of the enemy fleet. He knew the war wasn't over. The Zerari Imperium was vast and powerful. This was just one battle in a coming storm. But today they had sent a message, a very, very clear message. He turned to his comms officer. "Send a transmission to the Zerari home world. Make sure their new war leader hears it loud and clear." The officer nodded, awaiting the message. Carter stepped forward, his voice firm and unwavering. "You came to our colony thinking no one would come. You thought we were weak. You thought you could wipe us out like all the others. You were wrong. This is your only warning if you ever threaten humanity again." He looked out at the battlefield, at the smoldering remains of the once mighty Zerari fleet. "We will not stop until your empire is nothing but dust in the void." The message was sent. The war had only just begun, but the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The aftermath of the battle hung in the void like the remnants of a dying star. Wreckage from the once mighty Zerari fleet drifted aimlessly, broken husks of warships that had once inspired terror across the galaxy. Fires still raged on some of the larger vessels, their atmospheres leaking out into the endless dark. Bodies, both human and Zerari, floated in the debris field, silent testaments to the cost of war. But while the Zerari had been defeated, humanity knew the war was far from over. On the bridge of the UHS Retribution, Admiral James Carter studied the hollow table in front of him, his eyes sharp and calculating. "The battlefield has been ours today," he declared, "but soon the Zerari Imperium will regroup. Their pride is too great to allow this humiliation to stand. The next attack won't be a raid or a skirmish, it will be a full-scale war, and humanity needs to be ready. "Status report," he ordered. Commander Liu, his second-in-command, nodded. "We've secured Epsilon Prime. Civilian casualties were minimal thanks to the planetary defenses, though the colony took some damage during the initial bombardment. We've already deployed engineers for repairs." Carter gave a small nod of approval. They had saved the colony, but at what cost? The fleet. Elle hesitated, her expression grave. 77 ships lost, 34 heavily damaged. The Titan and Vanguard have suffered critical hull breaches, but their crews managed to seal the compartments before total collapse. Casualty estimates are still coming in, but we've lost a lot of good people, sir. Carter's jaw tightened. 17 ships gone, thousands of lives lost, and this was just the beginning. They didn't die for nothing. After a long moment, he added, "They proved that humanity isn't to be trifled with." "Commander Liu," he continued, "if I may, what's our next move? We sent the Zerari running, but they won't stay gone for long." Carter turned back to the hollow table, pulling up a star map. The Zerari Imperium was vast, stretching across hundreds of systems. It had taken them centuries to build their empire, but humanity had done in one battle what no other species had ever accomplished. They had broken them. "We don't wait," Carter said firmly. "We hit them before they can hit us hard. We take the fight to their front lines, disrupt their supply chains, make them bleed." Liu raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting a counteroffensive." "Damn right I am," Carter replied. "If we sit back, they'll come at us with everything they've got. But if we strike first, we put them on the defensive, make them question their own strength." The bridge fell silent as the weight of his words settled in. For decades, humanity had been ignored by the larger galactic powers. They had been seen as insignificant, unworthy. But today, that perception had changed. Today, they had announced themselves as a force to be reckoned with, and if the Zerari Imperium thought they could just lick their wounds and return for another round, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Carter turned to the comms officer. "Send a message to High Command. Tell them it's time to stop defending humanity's place in the galaxy." He turned back to the window, watching as their ships began to regroup. "It's time to claim it." Within hours of the battle, the War Council was convened aboard the UHS Retribution. The highest-ranking officers of the fleet gathered in the strategy room, their faces illuminated by the holographic projection of the Zerari Imperium's domain. It was vast, stretching across hundreds of systems, spanning the width of multiple sectors. But even the mightiest empire could fall, and Admiral Carter intended to be the one to tear it down. Seated across from him were representatives from Earth's unified military command, appearing via holographic transmission from high above Terra. Among them was Fleet Admiral Sarah Whitaker, the highest-ranking officer in the human navy. Her face was lined with years of experience, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. "You're proposing a preemptive war?" she asked. "Admiral Carter," he replied calmly, "I'm proposing survival. We all know what's coming next. The Zerari won't sit on this loss, they'll retaliate. And next time it won't be a raid on a colony, it'll be a full-scale invasion." General Vargas, the head of ground forces, folded his arms. "And you think hitting them first will stop them?" "No," Carter admitted, "but it will hurt them. Right now they're in disarray. We didn't just kill their fleet, we killed their war leader. Zeller was the backbone of their military doctrine. Without him, there's going to be infighting, a power struggle." He gestured at the map, highlighting key sectors. "If we strike here along their supply lines, we can keep them from amassing another invasion force. We don't need to conquer them. We just need to make sure they're too weak to come after us again." Filled the room. It was a gamble, a bold one. Fleet Admiral Whitaker studied him for a long moment. "And what if you're wrong? What if this just enrages them further?" Carter leaned forward, his voice low. "They already see us as insects. They came to our colony expecting no resistance, expecting us to be weak, but we showed them we are not prey." A beat passed, then another. Finally, Whitaker gave a slow nod. "I'll authorize the counteroffensive, but you understand the risks, Carter. If we do this, there's no going back. The war won't be fought on just one battlefield. It will become a war of extinction." Carter's voice was steel. "Then we make damn sure we're the ones left standing." The fleet mobilized within days. Their first target, Vel RX Station, a key logistics hub for the Zerari military. It was located in neutral space, lightly defended but essential for refueling and resupplying their forces. If humanity could take it, they would choke off a major artery of the Zerari war machine. As the UHS Retribution and its battle group dropped out of FTL, the station loomed before them. Alarms blared across the Zerari comms. They thought they were safe. They thought they had time. They were wrong. Carter stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the target. "All ships," he ordered, "fire at will." And just like that, the counteroffensive began. The first salvo of human firepower slammed into Vel RX station like the fist of an angry god. Torpedoes streaked across the void, their warheads detonating against the station's shielding and sending rippling energy waves across its surface. Mass drivers from the UHS Retribution and her sister ships unleashed their payloads, kinetic slugs punching through hull plating and igniting oxygen-rich compartments in spectacular bursts of fire. Within seconds, the once calm neutral space was transformed into a war zone. Inside the station, Zerari officers scrambled. "They're attacking," one of them screeched, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. "Humans do not attack first, they do now," another hissed, slamming his clawed hand down on the comms panel. "Send a distress signal, we must call for reinforcements." His words were cut off as a human torpedo pierced the command center. The detonation ripped through the hull, venting atmosphere and bodies into space. There would be no reinforcements. The humans had planned this strike meticulously. They had jammed the Zerari communications the moment they arrived, isolating Vel RX from any outside assistance. This station would fall, and no one would come to save it. On the Retribution's bridge, Admiral Carter watched the battle unfold. "Status," he asked. "Shields on Vel RX are down to 40%. "Commander Liu," she reported. "Their automated defenses are struggling to keep up. Enemy ships in the sector are either retreating or going dark to avoid detection." Carter smirked. "They're afraid. Good, prepare boarding teams," he ordered. "We're taking that station intact." The order was relayed, and within moments human assault pods launched from the fleet. Dozens of them streaked toward Vel RX like falling stars, slamming into its outer hull with magnetic clamps before cutting through the bulkheads with precision plasma drills. Then humanity poured in. The corridors of Vel RX became a slaughterhouse. Zerari warriors fought desperately, but they were caught off guard. They had been expecting another species to fear them, not one that met them head-on. Human Marines moved in tight formations, their exosuits enhancing their speed and strength. They cleared room after room with precision gunfire. "Push forward," a sergeant barked over the comms. "No survivors, make sure these bastards know who we are," a Zerari officer tried to rally his troops. "They cannot win," he roared. "Stand firm, humanity is weak." One blast from a Marine's rifle blew his head apart before he could finish. The humans pressed forward, and within an hour, Vel RX was theirs. The few surviving Zerari warriors surrendered, their weapons clattering to the floor. For the first time in history, a human flag was raised over a Zerari military station. On the bridge of the Retribution, Carter received the final report. "Vrax is secure," Liu confirmed. "Enemy casualties are estimated at 70%. The rest are prisoners. No survivors escaped the system," Carter nodded. "And our losses?" "Minimal," Liu replied. 38 dead, 100 wounded, a heavy price but far lower than anticipated. The first human victory in Zerari space is complete. But Carter wasn't finished. He turned back to the hollow table, highlighting the next target. "We don't stop here," he said. "We hit them again, harder, faster, make them fear every shadow in the void. The war has begun and humanity is done waiting." The fall of Vrax Station sent shock waves across the galaxy. For centuries, the Zerari had ruled with undisputed power, expanding their empire through fear and brute force. Their doctrine was simple: dominate or destroy. No species had ever dared to challenge them on their own ground until now. Reports of the station's loss spread like wildfire. The Zerari High Command was in chaos, their war councils filled with shrieking arguments and panicked debates. Some saw the attack as a fluke, an anomaly. Others saw it for what it was, a declaration of war. And war was something the Zerari were not used to losing. Within hours, the Imperium's response came. Fleet movements near the border systems tripled. Warships that had once patrolled the trade lanes were recalled to military strongholds. Entire planets were put under martial law, bracing for the human counterattack that the Zerari knew was coming. But Admiral Carter wasn't waiting for them to prepare. On the bridge of the UHS Retribution, he watched as the fleet moved into formation. "Vrax was just the beginning," he said. "The real strike is about to begin." "Status on the fleet?" Carter asked, his tone calm despite the storm brewing around him. Commander Lu, she scanned her terminal. All ships report battle readiness. The Vanguard and Titan are still undergoing repairs, but we have reinforcements from the UHS Indomitable and the Hammerfall. The fleet stands at 80 warships strong, a formidable force, but against the Zerari Imperium, it is still a fraction of what humanity will need to win this war. That's why, Carter explained, I have chosen the next target carefully. He brought up the Zor system. I order the holographic map to shift, displaying a system deep within Zerari-controlled space. Unlike Vel RX, which had been a logistical hub, Zal Tor is a full military garrison, a fortified stronghold guarding a key hyperlane used to move warships between Zerari sectors. Taking it would be suicide under normal circumstances, but these aren't normal circumstances. They'll expect us to strike somewhere along the border. Carter studied the map. They won't believe we have the audacity to go this deep into their territory. General Vargas, appearing over the comms, scoffed. Because it is audacious, Carter. We take this and we don't just wound them, we gut their military supply chains. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. What's the plan? Carter smirked. We make them think we're somewhere else. 1 week later, in the Zor system, Admiral Carvin of the Zerari Defense Fleet sat comfortably in his war throne aboard the Zis Wrath of Kazul, watching the latest intelligence reports. Human activity had been detected near the border, exactly where he expected them to be. Small skirmishes, minor raids, nothing of real significance. It was laughable. The humans thought themselves predators, but they were gnats before the might of the Imperium. His fleet was ready. The humans would come and they would be crushed. Then suddenly the alarms blared. Incoming fleet! A panicked officer screeched. Admiral, it's the humans, Carvin jolted forward. What, where? Here, sir. His blood ran cold. That was impossible. Before he could react, the Zerari holographic map lit up with chaos. Human warships were already descending upon the system's defense stations, unleashing brutal precision strikes. Key weapons platforms were taken offline before they could fire. Hyperlane relays were jammed, isolating Zor from calling for reinforcements. And then the UHS Retribution entered the fray. From the bridge of his flagship, Carvin watched as the human fleet cut through his defenses like a scalpel. Their tactics were unlike anything he had ever seen, coordinated, ruthless, perfectly timed. This wasn't just an attack, this was a slaughter. Carvin had time to react before a message pinged on his screen, a direct transmission. He hesitated, then accepted the holographic image of Admiral Carter. The human's blue eyes were ice cold. This is our galaxy now, Carter said. You just live in it. Then the Retribution's cannons fired, and the Wrath of Kazul burned. The Zis Wrath of Kazul erupted in a fireball, its remains spiraling into the void. The ship, once the pride of the Zerari fleet, was now nothing more than scattered debris floating among the dying remnants of the system's defenses. The UHS Retribution soared through the battlefield, its gun batteries still glowing hot from the final barrage. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge, watching the destruction unfold. Zor is falling, he said, his tone calm and controlled. Commander Lu, status. She scanned her console. The Wrath is down. Their admiral is confirmed KIA. Remaining enemy forces are in full retreat. She glanced at him. We've won, sir. A slow nod from Carter. Our losses, we took damage to the Hammerfall, and the Vanguard lost its portside guns, but our fleet remains at 75% combat strength. Lu paused. Ground forces are still engaged in mop-up operations. Resistance is minimal. Carter understood why the Zerari had ruled for centuries. They had fought as conquerors, never having been on the other side of the blade. And now they were scrambling, panicked, fleeing like cowards. Good, Carter said. He turned to the communications officers. Patch me through to the fleet. A moment later, his image was broadcast to every human warship in the system. This is Admiral Carter, he said, his voice steady. Zor is ours. Another Zerari stronghold has fallen, but we are not finished. His eyes burned with intensity. We will not stop. We will not retreat. We will not give them time to recover. His hands curled into fists. They thought no one would come for our people. They thought they could exterminate us without consequence. They were wrong. He leaned forward. Now we make them pay. War changed. After Zor, for the first time in history, the Zerari Imperium was on the defensive. Their fleets, once symbols of unstoppable power, were now being pulled back to protect their core systems. Entire border worlds were abandoned, left to rot as the Zerari scrambled to reinforce their crumbling empire. The High Council of the Imperium was in disarray. The humans are like a disease, one warlord hissed, his mandibles clicking in agitation. They spread and consume without warning. We must crush them now before they infect the entire galaxy. Another slammed a clawed fist on the war table. And how, brother? They have outmaneuvered us at every turn. Their tactics are unpredictable, their weapons are deadlier than we believed. And their soldiers, he exhaled sharply. Their soldiers fight as if they have nothing to lose. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The Zarari had assumed that humanity would surrender after the first invasion, that the loss of a single colony would break them. Instead, they had awakened a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and now the humans were coming for them. Meanwhile, aboard the UHS Retribution, Carter stood before a new holographic map, one that displayed the next phase of the war. His fleet was no longer just a human fleet. The recent victories had drawn allies to their side. Species that had once been too afraid to oppose the Zarari now had hope, now had a chance. General Vargas stood beside him, arms crossed. "We've sent a message, Carter. The whole damn galaxy knows where we stand. No backing down." "Good," Carter nodded. His gaze locked onto the Zarari home world, still untouched in the heart of their empire. "Because this war doesn't end until we stand on their soil, and for the first time in history, the predators are becoming the prey." The war escalated with brutal efficiency. Humanity did not fight like the Zarari. The Imperium had always waged wars of domination, swift invasions, overwhelming force, and absolute rule. But humans fought like survivors. They fought like a species that had crawled out of its own ashes more times than history could count. Zarari fleets fell one after another. Their mighty warships were torn apart in ambushes they never saw coming. Supply lines were cut. Entire colonies abandoned, as the Imperium struggled to contain the wildfire that humanity had become. And then came the coup de grace. On the bridge of the UHS Retribution, Carter stood over the glowing, hollow map. The image flickered with the details of their latest assault, a coordinated multi-front attack on the Zarari core worlds. "Target confirmed," Lou reported. "We're hitting Kazarin Prime, one of their primary home worlds. It's their last major industrial hub." Carter studied the projection. Defenses, massive planetary shields, orbital defense stations, 3 full Zarari war fleets in orbit, but they're stretched thin. They've moved too many forces to reinforce their crumbling front lines. This world is critical. If we take it, they won't recover. He exhaled slowly. "This is it, the moment where history will be written. Deploy the fleet." He ordered a full assault. The bridge officers rushed to carry out his command. The engines of 70 human warships ignited, pushing forward toward Kazarin Prime, the final bastion before the Zarari home world itself, the final push. The battle for Kazarin Prime began like all the others, with fire and fury. Humanity's fleet emerged from the void, weapons already hot, unleashing hell before the Zarari even had time to react. The first wave of human torpedoes obliterated orbital defense platforms, reducing them to flaming wrecks. Zarari warships scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. Humanity's warships moved like predators, weaving through enemy fire with unnatural coordination. They did not fight fair. They did not meet the Imperium in honorable battle. They fought to win. Within hours, the Zarari fleets were shattered, their defenses crumbled, and humanity descended upon the planet. Kazarin Prime burned. Drop pods rained from the sky, slamming into the surface like meteor strikes. Human soldiers stormed out, weapons blazing, cutting down anything that stood in their way. The Zarari ground forces tried to resist, but the fear was already there, the knowledge that they were fighting something they couldn't stop. Carter's forces pushed toward the capital, tearing through defensive lines like they were paper. Streets became battlegrounds, cities became tombs for the Imperium. And then the moment came, the capital fell. Human boots stood on Zarari soil, banners raised over the shattered remains of the Imperium's greatest stronghold. The Zarari High Council, once so proud and untouchable, now hid in fear for the first time in history. The Imperium was kneeling.